am the community manager for Methodspace.com, and happy to be joined here today by our panel. And if we can see our agenda, we'll be breaking this into kind of two segments, talking about some of the big picture issues at the macro level. Then we'll take a couple of questions and then come back and look at the micro level, and then use our remaining time to take some additional questions. So we'll be following your questions posted in the Q&A area. So please let us know what you'd like to hear more about. If you are new to Methodspace, this is a blog community sponsored by Sage. We're interested in everything to do with designing, planning, conducting research, writing about it, sharing results in all different kinds of ways. And you can see at the heart of this, we have teaching and learning, because we think whether you are a brand new researcher or an experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. And that's why I enjoy these kinds of opportunities. And today, we will be focusing on that teaching side, because sometimes we are in the role either formally as an instructor or professor, or as a mentor or guide, or even helping out our colleagues and peers. So next. So today, our panel, we have two very experienced educators in this field. Matti Nelimarkka, who is the author of this new book, Computational Thinking in Social Science, and Friedolin Merhout, who is from the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. So I'm going to turn it over to you to share some of your insights about how to teach this kind of topic.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And as was highlighted, we'll sort of first speak a bit more about, like, we call it the macro level of what's going on. And then after some Q&A and so on, we move into the details on the course. And something that I think would be fair to say at this point of time is that at least I haven't heard that much of discussion about teaching of computational social science broadly. So this, I think, is really interesting to sort of move forward into these kind of questions. And then I think that also means that we don't really have right or wrongs at this point of time, more of experiences. But Frido, have you had more discussions than me? Maybe it's just me in Finland who's lacking community to discuss about teaching.
No, I think for us it's definitely been quite an ongoing discussion. So I'm the head of this new 2-year master's program in social data science here. And so we've been running since 2020 now, when we took in our first cohort. And leading up to that, we've had quite a bit of discussion about, like, how to structure the program, who should be admitted here. But I do think that this always seems to be quite localized. So we're trying to, of course, build up on other programs that we can see around Europe, around the US as well, to follow up on this. But it definitely seems like it's a little bit ad hoc in each of the programs, and really that there's no specific way forward that is really, like, set up for how to develop these kinds of computational social science training programs, or these kind of educational opportunities for computational social scientists. I don't know how this has been working in Finland about, like, developing the program. How long has the program been around, and how it's been developed?
We started, I think that we now have our first master cohort in their second year. So it's also fairly recent in here. Then I think that here's also a slight interesting difference. So I've been teaching this stuff for social scientists longer, but the target group at that point of time was PhD students, and we can teach a bit more PhD students than we can master students. And then we actually just had a major overhaul of our curriculum with really thinking that what's the essential thing on here. So we we did quite a lot of soul searching here in Helsinki on this. And for example, we made a decision that we reduced the amount of traditional statistics. We built on a foundation of social statistics, but we actually wanted to remove quite a bit of the statistics and mathematics bits to make more space for programming and computational thinking. So I'm now thinking that our program, we have this one introduction course where we try to give you an overview of various kind of things from more sort of social science datafication and what does it mean into some of the more technical side of things. I'm not sure if they still touch the sensitive topic of what's causality, but that was at some point of time the idea that we would cover both of these. And that's because we also, when the students come to our program, we get quite a mixed group. So some come from statistics background and now need a bit more support on getting the social sciences up. And then we have people who come from social sciences who might need quite a lot of work to get the quantitative skills up to speed. So we have also a quantitative methods class, and then we have a bunch of classes around programming with different emphases and letting the students to choose quite freely from those. And then the rest is free. I think that's something that I've been tutoring some of these students, so I've tried to push them that if you come from a statistics background, don't take the easy statistics class, go into our classes in sociology and global development studies, whatever is interesting for you. Then if you come from these disciplines, don't go to those classes, take our sort of methods heavy classes instead. But how have you been trying to figure out this complex balance on things?
Yeah, I think for us, it's I think you're like already like pointing to a very interesting and of course like challenging issue that really the computational social science and social data science is really at this intersection of the more technical disciplines and the more social scientific disciplines. So in our case, it's actually the case that this master's program in social data science is really located physically as well as administratively and just also ideationally at the Faculty of Social Science. So that means for us, there's a lot of practitioners from across these 5 different departments that we have here at the Faculty of Social Science. So from anthropology, economics, political science, psychology, and sociology. Practitioners or scholars from these 5 disciplines who are involved in some kind of way with social data scientific methods, computational social scientific methods, and then bringing them together and thinking about what is really relevant for social scientists to learn. So like we really maybe making it a bit easier for us by bracketing this question of, okay, how can the more people with a more technical background also enter computational social science or social data science. So for us, really, we've been thinking about how can we bring these methodologies from computer science, from information science into the social scientific field, and how can we use them to really answer social scientific questions. So like the way that we've thought about this so far with social data science is really that it's a program and also a discipline that's really trying to leverage these methodologies, these new data, these new ways of thinking about data and use them for social scientific purposes. That also then means that this is really how our program is structured, that it's this 2-year program, and the first year is really entirely mandatory courses, taking the students that are coming in with a bachelor in most cases from a social science background, but generally working students that would have some experience working empirically, be that quantitative or qualitative, have a minimum of 30 ECTS, so about 1 semester at least, like social science background, and then actually taking that kind of experience and learning about methodology. So starting from the basics of programming, also some refreshers on statistics here, thinking about research design and key concepts in social data science, but really like only touching the highest level here and what things that we might be interested in, drawing a little bit on social science, and then really diving into causal inference, machine learning, both supervised and unsupervised, digital methods. So like how do we actually approach and maybe contextualize the data collection online that we're conducting here. And then one thing that we've been really thinking that's really important and also like a benefit maybe of this European context here is to actually have these kind of very specific legal frameworks and ethical frameworks. So that's also something that we're really thinking about here. So in our case, really thinking about social data science as a discipline that's really equipping individuals with a social science background with the tools to work with new kinds of data, work with these new methodologies, and apply them really to social scientific applications here, rather than thinking about it the other way around. Because of course, if we talk about computational social science, there's also a lot of people from the more technical sciences like going into social scientific applications.
Yes, I like that you brought up the phrase of key concepts, because we actually have a similar kind of course, and then it would be so fun at some later point to sort of try to contrast what are the differences on the key concepts even, because I hear some of the similarities in these sort of, especially those who are not from Europe. We have quite strict privacy regulation now in place, and that has been impacting a bit on what we want students to know, and then there's some other things as well, like how to bring a bit more of this social science thinking and these into these audiences. I at least like, and I think that it's fair to say that both of us are working on a situation where we have students who already are familiar with social science to some degree, like they need to have a bachelor with some ideas and so on, and with some good practices that they've learned, and sadly also some maybe not as good practices that we need to weave them off from those. So here I was just speaking that we are still fighting with some other programs. We've completely moved away from SPSS, but some other master's programs are preferring to use that still, and it's well, challenging if people's background is on that particular tool, because I think that it limits certain things. But maybe we should speak a bit more like when we are thinking of these programs. Of course, it's 2 years, 120 credits, so not that much, and we need to teach something to students. So what are the things that we want to on this? I think that we already touched this topic of ethics a bit more. For me, especially when writing the book, I figure out that it's really quite a bit on thinking and imagination that I'd really hope people to have, both sort of, especially those who are maybe coming more from the computer science side, really having this sociological imagination or social science imagination to think about good questions and good ideas on what to study. But then those who are coming more from social science direction, who still might need some help actually with these research question generation and observations. But for them, it's also sort of highlighting what's possible so that they can design a bit on what to do. So giving them glimpses of what kind of things you can do without saying that this is exactly, because I feel that we don't yet have those books. Like if you do a regression analysis, there's 5 or 6 steps that you need to do. You take a textbook and it tells you those steps. But I think that in computational social science, we are not yet there. I hope that we will never be, because then it starts to get more boring. And that's why we need these imaginations of what to do and what kind of questions to ask. I
think that's like a really good point. So particularly, of course, also thinking about what is it really that computational social scientists need to learn, and of course, there's all the technical questions there, or like maybe the disciplinary questions, like how do you set the boundaries there? But I think a bigger part of what the students or maybe anybody who'd like to become a computational social scientist needs to learn are these more like maybe hard to grasp quality, something, as you're saying, so you call it imagination. Of course, with a sociology background, that's really what you have to call it. But I would also call it maybe more generally something about creativity. And that's, I think, also where one aspect that's, of course, very clear about computational social science is that it's really a team science. So it's something where in most cases, the best computational social science that gets conducted is not conducted by individuals who really can handle all the things at the same time, like know about all the data, know about all the theory, all about the methods, and really are like at the forefront at all of these things. But it's really in many cases that there's teams of individuals who like bring together different qualities. So I think really this creativity, of course, also lives from computational social science really happening in groups. So that's also where in our program, and I think one general structure that we're really think is really important is to actually provide this kind of opportunity for group work, but maybe also a little bit of an enforcement for group work, because one thing that of course happens if you bring in individuals from very different backgrounds, even if that's just within the social sciences, people come in with their own preferences, and if you just allow students to just sort by the preferences, maybe everybody who, for example, like took economics is really interested in like how can we make things most efficient, and then if you just allow the kind of formation of groups based on interests or on things that individuals come in with, I think that really is potentially hampering to this kind of creativity that you want to engender. And so there, I think that most individuals who are really interested in computational social science come into this OD with the like this broad interest, but you also have to make the structure really work for this. So like maybe have quite a bit of group work, maybe enforce this interdisciplinarity that students are really like being jumbled around and being exposed to the kind of ideas, the kind of ways of asking questions that they haven't been exposed to before, but also, of course, maybe having to justify or reflect and make an argument for why the approach that they was thinking of may be the best way, because of course that allows us also to really reflect on the practices that we're just using in the day-to-day. So really this kind of group work and enforced interdisciplinarity. I don't know if this is something that you've been thinking about in Finland as well, or?
And I think that's a great question, because I have sort of mixed feelings broadly on the sort of team sciences aspect, but I know that a lot of work, and my work of course takes place in teams, and then there's more sort of traditional social sciences that's still individual. But let's sort of I'll bring a bit reflection on the most recent iteration of the key concept, where I was speaking about datafication. So I was the lecturer who needed to speak about that, and then what we did is that we read 3 articles, or the students read 3 articles before that, and we went to discuss those. And then those coming more from critical social sciences, this was a familiar approach, broadly sort of to engage an article, and they could sort of do that. And then those who were maybe coming more from statistics, they were shocked that they need to explore this article. And why I'm speaking of this is that this collaboration, it's also a skill. It's quite fundamental skill that you need to learn. And then I think that both of us cannot saying on that major research projects, there's still situations where people just don't seem to find the common terms or don't understand each other. And then those are really fun. At the book, it has a wonderful story about me not understanding communication scholars. I've had a background in political science, but we were speaking about how to study racism, and they wanted to get all the racist content in social media. And I was like, yeah, that's possible, but not that easy, because we need to define this, and they didn't want to define it. Luckily, there was a colleague who sort of figured out what's going on here and could help us to understand each other much better. But it really speaks about these fundamental skills of collaboration, ethics, as well as fundamental skills. And I would say that we don't speak that much of validity and reliability as fundamental skills of doing science, and then really getting all of those aligned. I think that this is, I want to emphasize that I feel that these are really skills that we should try to learn and try to teach to students with the idea. And I'll be honest on here, the first few times will suck for students, but if they do it in university context with, well, not that high impact or not that critical aspects of that, I think that it would be a really nice learning experience. And I'm now running a more sort of traditional methodology class, and I've explained to the TAs that one of the principles is that we allow the students to fail on particular things that we know that they're going to fail, so that they at least have this experience that was a really bad idea that we had at that point of time. But yeah, having this more collaborative approach and then really have it systematically, I think that that's something that we are missing, and maybe we should take a deep time. And I could also, now when you said this, I should really rethink some of my classes. I think that this also sort of highlights the timeline of this. There's no one class that allows you to learn how to do collaboration and how to learn these subject things and so on. How have you sort of considered the time as an aspect on this?
Yeah, so I think that the way that we've thought about this is that it's, or like I think one big challenge that you're already pointing out is that it's really important to teach this kind of, to teach how to work in groups with people coming from different backgrounds, having different ideas here. And so I think one thing that we're also still trying to think about better, like how do we actually not just provide the structure or like basically the forced setting where you have to work in groups, but how do we actually provide the support? Because I do think that that's a key part, but of course the challenges here is if we're talking really like in a formal educational setting, is how do you evaluate whether students have learned to work in groups or whether they just like, well, everybody did their part and then it somehow came together and they passed. So I think that's something that's still somewhat unclear to us. And of course, also we have potentially the individuals who have the technical skills to teach specific methodologies, but we're not necessarily equipped to actually pedagogically really like facilitate this group work. So I think that's like a really like one big challenge here that we maybe have to like think about more. How do we even like facilitate this group work, and how do we make sure that the students have the support that they need to actually work things out? Because of course, this is really where a lot of potential like interpersonal challenges also come up, and that then could potentially detract here. But one way that we've at least thought about it is that a key focus of this group work is really like on the conceptual level. So for example, in one of the first courses where it's all about research design, it's a lot about, it's not necessarily technical, but really like forcing or like asking for development of these kind of creative ideas of what can we do, for example, by combining found data with ready-made data, found data with custom-made data. So more this kind of conceptual ideas where it's really about individuals talking with one another, rather about like what kind of project would we like to set up, rather than really like implementing something very specific. So it's not about like learning to, I don't know, write a loop in Python, but really more like coming up with like interesting ideas. And I think that's the place that are really excellent for potentially developing this kind of group work, this kind of interdisciplinarity. But
that really highlights, yes, because the book, I've worked quite a bit on the book, so sorry for bringing it up regularly, but it has these group work exercises that I actually imagined, and I've used those with my own students, and it's always been fun, because one aspect also when you have multidisciplinary groups like we have in some institutes in computational social science, where I've also used some of those exercises, and then you give a sort of methodological perspective, like think about this kind of data set and what kind of questions would you ask of this. It also brings up these disciplinary differences and disciplinary perspectives really nicely, and opens up, I think, really nice discussions in a safe-ish environment, because they know that they just don't need to do anything amazing, and helps them to at least acknowledge that there are smart people who might just ask different questions.
Well, we have a few questions from our group, if we would like to take a couple of those and then move on. One person was asking about, even though this whole field is new and the programs are new, where do you imagine students finding jobs after graduation? How does this kind of preparation set them up for their professional or academic life? And have you received any feedback from employers about, what they think people need to know in this kind of field?
I have this dream that in a couple of years, our social data scientists would start to take positions where companies now hire data scientists, because what I see with those people who come maybe a bit more computer science heavy education is that some of the empirical problems, especially if they touch topics that relate to society, they are not maybe the best ones to lead those. They might be really good if they are given a direction and someone supervises and so on. But that's a direction that I've been pushing quite heavily, that we should get these companies who are now working with quite many applications of data science or data science to society. They should start working on those. And I think that would improve the situation if we look at the whole discussion about AI bias. If there would have been a social scientist who had read a bit about representation and data generation and social production of data, they might have pointed out this quite clearly. Actually, it was pointed out quite early on, in I think early 2000s, that there might be some issues on this, but it just didn't go into those application areas yet. So I do feel that there's some benefit that having a bit more social science background provides, even in these kind of data science positions. And then data science positions are everywhere, from companies into government. But we haven't yet tested this out with the actual companies. I know that some of our people, they sort of are moving more towards statistics kind of places, like opinion survey companies and Statistics Finland, which is the national office for those. Have you done any better, Frido, on your side to understand this actually further?
So we're actually right in the process of this. So this is maybe also a very particular context where in Denmark, really every educational program has basically to be approved by the government, basically. And for it to be approved, there has to be actually a panel of employers that says that this is something that we actually support. So each program basically has a panel of employers. So we're on a fairly regular basis interacting with individuals from companies that would like to employ students that have these kind of social data science, computational social science skills. And there's actually quite a good representation also of these maybe bigger companies. So there's companies from the healthcare sector. There's companies from there's some representation from the public sector. Of course, also quite a few individuals who are more under very broad umbrella of consulting. But I think one of the key things that we always hear about is that these individuals from these companies are really aware, as Matti describes already, that they have individuals who are really, really skilled at the technical side. So they have data scientists who are really good at implementing new methodologies, who are good at making the processes more efficient. But the key challenge that they might face is that somebody actually has to figure out what is it that we should be doing here. And so what maybe also are some of the implications. So they are really looking for some individuals who can translate a little bit between the decision makers as well as the people who have to implement these decisions, and maybe contextualize some of the overall processes quite a bit more. So I also have the hope that we can get more into this, that students with a social data science, computational social science degree can move more into the data science roles. The one challenge that I see for that, of course, is also that there has to be some kind of understanding of what it actually means to be a computational social scientist, what it means to be a social data scientist. So I think this is something where we still, as an emerging field, as scholars, really have to develop what the identity of what it is that individuals with this kind of degree can actually do in the labor market. And
then now I'm feeling the pain on my heart, because I should have a session with my students that I'm super about mentoring, to sort of also help them to understand their expertise and also where their expertise not lay, which is don't go to the job market trying to fight for the data scientist on a technical role, because you will lose. If not on skills, at least because the other one has a fancier job title and fancier degree. But then if you are able to sort of communicate this idea of this mixed approach and its benefits, then I think that there's much more value.
We have one more question that I would say is kind of at the macro level, and some of the other questions people have posted are about the micro level classroom side. So we'll let you talk about that before going to those questions. But there are a couple of people who've asked about opportunities to network with other computational social scientists. Is there an association? And then also, another person asked, what about, are there opportunities that are interdisciplinary, that allow people who are interested in the computational side to perhaps, mingle and learn from people from some of the other social science disciplines. So, how can people connect with others in the field?
There is an association. Frida, do you know actually the details of what's the deal with the association?
Yeah, maybe I can just make a little bit of a plug for it, because actually this upcoming July, the International Conference on Computational Social Science, IC2S2, will be actually happening in Copenhagen. So there's an international conference that basically alternates between Europe and the US. So far, I think that's always the two places where they've been alternating, where really it's, I would say, probably the biggest single event where individuals who are broadly identified with computational social science are coming together. And so I think that's probably also the organization that would be most of the focus and most have the opportunity, where individuals might have the opportunity to learn about the cutting edge, but also just get exposed to that overall community. I don't know if that's if IC2S2 has any kind of association work beyond the conference. I think, at least as far as I know, the conference is like the main thing that's happening there. But of course, with the conference there's already the opportunity to reach out to individuals who are coming from a similar background. And then one big educational opportunity is actually the Summer Institutes in Computational Social Science, SICSS or SIX, that are happening on an annual basis. And I think at this point there are around 20 to 30 Summer Institutes each year across the globe that are happening, that are really directed at early career scholars. So from advanced master's students, mostly focusing on postdocs, on PhD students and postdocs, that are really 1 to 2 week training opportunities to really get a first introduction to computational social science. So I think both of these are really excellent resources to get an introduction to the community, but also to get some ideas about what's maybe the cutting edge, or just to get started off in the first place.
Well, if you can send me the information about those, we could include that in the email that the attendees will receive with the recording, so they can look into those opportunities. Well, why don't we move on to the next part of your discussion about the micro level and what happens in the classroom, because we have a lot of interest from our attendees in that side of it.
Yes, so I was thinking, and Frida and me agreed that it might be fun to start with some success or failure stories on this. I again have the benefit that I've been thinking a lot on this, and I think that one failure story that I would want to share was my first ever programming class for social scientists. We had quite an intensive technical program, and then we read a few papers to sort of, which I hoped that would contextualize those. And everything went great, and the students could actually do stuff in the end of the class, which is already amazing. And then in the last class, one of the students asked me that, okay, now I've learned all of this, what I'm supposed to do with all of these technical things that you've taught me? And then that highlighted that they actually need a lot of help connecting this stuff in the classroom from the abstract exercises that we do into their sort of world of problems and topics that they want to engage in. And that's been a job to sort of start thinking about that problem.
I think if we're just starting out with failures to then learn from them, I think one thing that we've really been thinking really hard about, and that we thought was a really great idea, is drawing a little bit on this general idea of the summer institutes that are really, as mentioned, these are two-week intensive summer schools where basically participants meet up every day, 5 days a week, from morning to evening, to start learning about all different kinds of methodologies in computational social science. And we thought this is a really great idea, and it's really something that we think is really, really important, particularly if you're starting out with some kind of students learning programming for the first time really need this kind of very intensive way of learning programming, because it's like learning a language. So if you meet up once a week and then you have some readings in between, and that's all you do, then you're not really going to get proficient in any reasonable amount of time. So we thought it would be really good if we had a class that meets up 4 times a week. There's 2 hours of lectures in the morning, 3 hours of exercise in the afternoon, so about 20 hours a week. It worked really, really excellently. We had it scheduled so that we have a block structure where there's 7 weeks for each course. So there was basically 4 days a week of training in programming for 7 weeks straight. And then afterwards, the next block was basically research design and thinking about the ethics of data. So like students suddenly, they worked very, very intensely on programming for these 7 weeks, 4 days a week. And then suddenly for 7 weeks, nothing happened with programming anymore. So the key idea with having like very intense classes, I think is really still very excellent. But of course, then there was the drop off that suddenly students weren't actually using all the programming anymore. So that's where we had to learn that it's good to have these kind of very intense classes, but to, in this case, stretch it out and make sure that this kind of engagement with programming is really like a constant thing rather than something that's, well, happening for 7 weeks and then suddenly nothing anymore.
Yes, I remember that for some of my classes, I've been even, the students were not that happy on that, but we tried to do something like for the Christmas break, having them some exercises so that they would get using those skills, because otherwise they start to forget that, and it's surprisingly quick curve on the forget side, while it's really not that nice curve on the learning side of this. Then maybe thinking some success cases, something that I'm really happy on my own teaching, and the students might slightly disagree, but has been the sort of ability to move more into flipped classroom settings where actually the students are supposed to do a much more learning. So I started with more lecture heavy approaches, and then that, especially with the technical bits, it's really frustrating for you to show something and then you can see that for some it's the right time, for some it's way too late, so they already know that for some it's slightly too early. So I think that with this flipped approach, I think that I've figured out how to manage these skill differences in a way that still allows people, because for some it takes 2 weeks, for some it takes 3 weeks. It doesn't really, for me, it doesn't make a difference as long as they learn what they are supposed to learn. And I really like this approach. But I must say that the students constantly complain on that and say that they don't like it, but I've said that no, this is good for you. It might not be fun, but it's good.
Yeah, I think this flipped classroom approach, so like putting really like a very strong emphasis on students, particularly for the programming part, or like getting to know programming, putting a lot of emphasis on students actually needing to take time outside of the classroom to get up to a specific level, or like follow up on things really by themselves. I think this is a really important part, really to just like communicate generally that, again, this is like learning a language. You can't expect to like spend 2 hours, 3 hours a week on this, and then you'll learn this within a semester. This is something where you really have to work. You have to, there has to be some motivation actually for yourself to like spend time on this outside of the classroom. Of course, we also, I think one challenge that we really identify is that, of course, students are also, they might be interested, but they're also maximizing what they're getting out of the learning and what they're getting outside of the classroom. And so this is where, at least for these like very like fundamental courses, we really decided that, well, we have to have some kind of face time to make sure that there's actually time dedicated on the students in the students' day, where they sit down and work on these programming problem sets, for example, right now. So we have these 2 hours of lectures in the morning and then 3 hours of guided exercise sessions with TAs, importantly in smaller groups in this in a smaller setting, where these 3 hours of implementing the concepts for the lectures really is happening. And I think has been working for us quite well. But of course, also you do get pushback about students wanting to be able to like define their times a little bit more freely. But I do think particularly for the introduction, it can be quite helpful. But I think, of course, that also maybe raises one of the other issues here for like designing these kinds of courses. Is just like some of the key challenges around student heterogeneity. I don't know if you have found any kind of, if you haven't had that issue yet, that the students come in with very different backgrounds, very different speeds of adapting to things, or if you've encountered it, like how do you go about it, like making sure that different skill level students coming in with different backgrounds can actually like follow along in the same course?
I've really tried to sort of solve that with the different speeds and having exercise sessions, and this sort of, and I think that here something that should be said out loud is that there's actually a fair amount of work on the learning of programming languages done in computer sciences, and also a practice. So in Finnish the word is vierihoito, which basically means that for some students you need to sit next to them and really help them to understand what's going on. They're not stupid, and it's not magic, but they need the help to think in this kind of way. Something that I've also found, I think, helpful over time with different audiences, not only social scientists, is trying to at some point of time move away from the syntax itself and the details of how you do programming into a bit higher level. That let's first figure out what's your sort of approach to the problem itself on a piece of paper, or then explain them something with actual. I've had some exercises like find the highest number on this list or something like that. So on that, it really helps when I have my card deck, and then we can go through those, and then we can test out different hypotheses, and then they figure out approach, then they can do the programming. But really helping them to separate these two activities has been, I think, really nice. And then having those sessions where they do work, that's how they do it in programming sciences. So you have these lectures, and then you have, depending a bit on the scale, when we were doing, or when I was doing TAing at Aalto University, we had several hours each day, and then the students could come there to work on the problems. And I think that we had like 20 hours or something like that of TA time for them to work on that. But that was, of course, a class of 200 students or something like that. So we could really allocate also quite a bit on, or they could allocate quite a bit of resources on that. But that's something I've been dreaming, and then hopefully next fall I will actually have some video clips so that I would actually explain some of these concepts also in code, and go through the code and have that as a video supplement so that the students then can go back and pause, return, do all of this kind of work, so that they can really help and have these on their own face. That I think is something that I've learned to appreciate quite a bit, because there are these, and then none of the students that we get are stupid. All of them could do this if they want to. It's only a matter of getting them a bit more accustomed to these ideas and these approaches.
I think that's also like one of the benefits, or like one of the really like good approaches, really like at the most basic level that as you like pointed out, is to abstract from the code. So not to worry about like a particular language or anything to begin with, but to think about like the logic of a specific problem, and to write out pseudocode about how you would, like, what would you do if you don't have to worry about like, can the computer like interpret what I'm doing right now? Like what would be the logic of actually going about solving a given problem? And so writing out the logic in just like plain language first, as this kind of pseudocode, and then translating that into what the code is actually should be doing, or actually has to like to write it in the specific language, which of course then also helps with one of the other things that I think is really important for students to just get into the habit of, is like annotating your code and commenting on what you're doing. And if you're going about this by like starting out with pseudocode, with writing down the logic of what you want to do, then you've already got your commenting on what your code is doing. And so that's also a good way of like implementing this, or like just getting students into the habit of doing good practices here.
And on the pseudocode side, I've also, for some exercise or for some courses and some classes, and now I'm thinking that we actually did not do this this year, but we should bring it back. There are these children's toy programming languages, which sounds really weird, and the students are a bit confused when I sort of say that we first look it on this. But the good thing with those is that they really abstract away from all the details, and you cannot break it. It's literally impossible to break those things. You might get a wrong outcome, but it will always produce an outcome, usually in a way that you can observe. And then I use those in a way that the students first solve, or I did use, and I should continue using those in the way that students would first solve those in the like children's language, and then when they face the same problem and they might forget what they were supposed to do, I can refer to the children language version that they've already figured out, and then they see the connection, which I also think helps to abstract also away on the programming languages itself. Yes, you need to learn a programming language at the beginning. It needs to be a one programming language, but it's not actually that specific what language you end up learning, and most likely you need to learn another language in a couple of years anyhow. So that's the reality of the life. But then I think that you brought also the aspect of reading code and exercise that I've done to help them to sort of understand the value of these clarity of the code, is that sometimes I give them really messy, extremely messy pieces and ask them to figure out, what does this do? And I think that they understand after that, especially if they've produced code similar to that, which I sometimes check that it's as close to what they've produced as possible. They understand that this is a problem, and they start to learn these practices. This is really important. We've also done, and that's because the classes are fairly small, we've tried to do so that some exercises they would actually return and get comments on the clarity, not on the solution itself, but the clarity and these kind of aspects, so that they would get these good practices in place. Because as you say, those practices, they're really important and really confusing if you are not accustomed to those at some point of time, and especially if no one tells you at some point of time that don't use two-letter variable names, because that's going to hurt you at some point of time.
I'm wondering also, so we talked about this a little bit, like what are some other maybe common challenges and how to approach them. So I think one thing, of course, the common challenges is that there's just like general practices that are really potentially really important, but they're also maybe a little bit cumbersome to learn. And I think one of the key challenges that students might also oftentimes face is just in general learning that any kind of failure or any kind of error is not something to like we get frustrated about, but actually trying to like getting into the mindset of learning out of errors or mistakes. And I know that one thing that we've gotten some good feedback on, but I think it's always very challenging to implement, is actually having some kind of live coding. So where the instructor actually implements things on the fly in the classes. And of course, that also will then like just illustrate that, well, this like really nice notebook that you've received at the beginning of your class, that took like many hours to develop. When somebody who's like quite experienced here tries to code on the fly, or like tries to do live coding, then errors will pop up, and then also maybe illustrating how to like go about solving them. I don't know if you've thought about this at all, or like if any experience with
on the sort of TAing when I'm next to the student, and if there's an error message, what I usually do, even if I know what's the error, if it's something super trivial, I might reveal that this is the error, but otherwise we usually take the error message, put it on Google, and then they find the first sort of Stack Overflow question answer on this particular error. And of course, the students hate me for doing this, and it feels for them fake that what they learn is Googling errors in the class. But I'm trying to sort of say that that's also the reality often, is that you end up Googling errors or Googling solutions for some kind of things. You first need to sort of understand what you want to do, then you go Googling on that and that. I find it really helpful to get them to understand this in these practices.
Well, we have a few questions, I think, tie into some of the points that you've been making. You talked about the the importance that this is an interdisciplinary field. And then in some ways, inherently in that, you have people coming from, kind of the two sides, more to the social science side and the programming side, and how you bring those together. So, so two, I think, kind of related questions. One is about evaluation. So, would you, be focusing on evaluation of the technical know-how, or more for the, understanding that might be kind of the more social science research side of it? And similarly, how, say somebody coming from a qualitative research background who, understands more of the conceptual and abstract and social science discipline side, but, is, has a lot of trepidation about taking on the other more technical side. So both from the instruction side and the evaluation side, how do you kind of bridge those two kinds of student backgrounds?
I think that those are slightly different courses, at least on our system. So there are the more technically heavy courses where like in our introduction to programming class, it's literally then exercise is done. That's the evaluation criteria. And then we have these more advanced courses where we sort of start to engage with actual methods and actual research problems and so on. The focus starts to shift more from purely technical into the social and technical sides, that you actually need to have a proper research questions and good enough stuff going on and these kind of things in place. But I'm seeing nodding, but do you want to continue?
Yeah, no, I think this is certainly like the similar approach to what we have, particularly when it comes to just like getting started with an introductory programming course. So the overall communication and the overall also assessment of the of student work is based around actually getting to the goal, but it's less about. So this is not we're not teaching anybody to become the most efficient programmer ever. I think so. We are working with one of the Sage books by Phil Booker, Python for Social Scientists, that has this this metaphor of grilled cheese programming. So this is really about like using programming for a social scientific purpose and making it work. We're never going to be able to teach a social scientist to like compete in like writing the most elegant program, the most elegant code, the most efficient way of organizing their data, organizing their data pipelines to compete with somebody who has a computer science background. But of course, this is also not what computational social science is necessarily about. This is about figuring out how do we use these data and how we use these methodologies for the specific social scientific purpose that we have here. And so that's where the evaluation really is about making sure that students get the task done, but it's less about, is this code exactly how we would have written it, exactly the best way to do it? But actually, can we see that you understand the logic of coming to a solution, of arriving at the point where you need to arrive?
So it sounds like, kind of the based on the questions that people were asking, that, it's like looking more holistically at the program as a whole, and understanding that, some coursework or some parts of courses are going to be kind of purely technical, and then others are going to kind of bring those sides together, with a social science background and the social, how does this fit with, actually designing a research study? You're not just trying to do programming on its own, you're using it for the purpose of the research. So, that whole area of the research thinking that goes into it.
Yes, and then if you have students who come more from the computational background and a more purely computational background, then I really feel that it's important for them to engage a few courses on social sciences, and this can be customized on what topics they are interested, or what kind of career wishes they have, so that they also understand that kind of approach and thinking much better than what computer scientists alone would understand. and balancing those things out. So there needs to be some room for those kind of classes as well, if not from the main program, like we don't have in our center when we don't really have that many of those classes, but then we take classes from other disciplines at the Faculty of Social Sciences to supplement if we see that there's a fit on that. So you really need the spectrum of different kind of courses, and then hopefully you can intertwine these so that it's meaningful for the student in the end, and then they see these connections. So if you go to a programming class and then you afterwards go into more sort of research design class, you sort of can connect that, oh yes, now some of the things that we did into programming start to make sense, or I understand why they were so painful on this particular issue.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, which of course is a big question and everyone is talking about, the ChatGPT and the other BARD and the new AI tools, and how does the advent of those kinds of tools change the way that you teach the programming skills, or even how you teach altogether?
I think that's a wonderful question, and maybe sort of not moving into the topic of ChatGPT, but already Stack Overflow and Googling for solution has some aspects of those in place, that you need to articulate your problem in a way that you can find someone's solution to that problem. And of course, it has some impact. I've been in Finland, at least, we have a lot of discussion going on this, and I'm reminded by some studies in late 80s, early 90s, where they spoke about bringing calculators to math classes. What things are so essential that we need to master those no matter what? Like everyone needs to do sums and divisions and multiplications without calculator, or know at least how to do those. Once you master those, you can move into these more advanced things. I do think that on computational side, there are also some quite essential concepts, like what's a variable and how loops work and so on, which you need to master even without ChatGPT. Then once you master those, you can start using the GitHub Copilot to solve your problems, and then move into this much more interesting domain of I can get this some code, and then I customize it to really fit the problem, really fit the question that I have in mind. I think that's what's been really important in my own sort of thinking of research, and why I hate many pre-made tools of computational data analysis, is that they don't always fit the exact question that I have in mind. But Frido, sorry, I took so much of your time already.
No, I think that's probably exactly where I was going to go as well. That I think these tools are definitely here to stay, and I think we are still like struggling quite a bit to figure out like what is it that we're encouraging students to use them for. So I think from our perspective, it's definitely that we have to figure out how to use them. There's no way of banning them, of like trying and keeping them out. We have to figure out how to work with them specifically. And I think that's really where it comes a little bit back to what Matti is saying, to like making sure that students understand the fundamentals, and also learn how to identify when something just doesn't make sense, because that's of course the challenge here, is that you will get an answer. The question is this really like the answer to the question that you're trying to ask? And how do you figure out if that answer makes any sense or not?
I was interviewing someone this week who was talking about a computational approach, and the way they laid out their approach, they said, well, here's the human side and here's the machine side. And to me, that being able to distinguish, as you were saying, Matti, what do you need to know so that you can use these as tools, versus expecting that the tool is going to do the job and connect all of these dots. So I think with any new field, and especially interdisciplinary field, some of those defining what the skills are and how to teach them, and what things to give prominence to, and what kinds of approaches will allow people to develop those capacities is certainly a challenge. So I think we have come to the end of our time. Thank you for this discussion and kind of bringing out, some of the questions and the approaches that you've tried. And I hope that will find useful to the people who are here today and watch this recording. And as we mentioned at the top, we will